Loving Sairam, Sister Soumya Panchanathan. The Sri Satya Sai Global Council Trinidad and Tobago lovingly welcomes you to the series Awake, Unite and Inspire. We are really happy, privileged, and honored to have you as our guest on our program Awake, Unite and Inspire. So, Sister, can you share with us how did you first come into contact with our beloved Mother Sai?
Sairam, and thank you so much for having me here. And I would really like to say loving salutations at Swami's lotus feet. And I pray that he speaks what he wants everyone to hear. So in answer to that question, I actually had to make no effort. I was one of the people who is lucky enough to come because they are brought to Swami by their parents. So we were living in Windsor, Ontario, and my parents were looking for somewhere to take me where I would have some roots in our traditions, some place where I could have other people who also were trying to sort of find our way. So we just happened upon the Sai Center, and the rest is history. I started going. I loved the bhajans. At that time, I don't think I was so involved in the teachings, but I just thought that the bhajans were wonderful. And then when I was 13, we saw Swami for the first time. And I don't even think even then it hit me that this is God, or that this is someone really, I don't think it didn't connect at that time, but slowly, I think over time, he just became this very important part of our lives. And that's how it happened, very slowly. Sairo.
Thank you very much, Sister, for sharing. But let's go back to the first time that you saw Swami in the physical form was at the tender age of 13. What did you feel? What was that experience like at that tender age?
So many people say, okay, I felt so full in my heart, I started to cry, or I knew in that moment he was God. No, for me, I was just busy writing the words of all the bhajans that were being sung. And I was more interested in that. And yeah, he was there, he was giving darshan, and I was interested. I saw him create vibhuti, but when you're that age, or maybe it was because I had heard he does that, it didn't seem particularly unusual. I just expected miracles to happen when he was there. So I honestly can say that the first time I saw him, I had built him up in my head so much. It was like, oh, he's a person. And he just struck me more as a person than as God at that time, God or Guru or any of that.
Okay, but your parents were ardent devotees of Bhagwan. And since you were 13, after that age, when did you next go back to Puttaparthi, and what was that experience like?
So after 13, I think there were many trips after that. But the trip that probably made the biggest difference was when I was 16. I spent about a month or two in Puttaparthi. And then in 81 also, I spent 2 months in Puttaparthi. And I went with a youth group from Canada. And so those trips, I think slowly made me connect to Swami in a much different way. And, I always say everybody has a story of how they came to Swami, but people who were introduced to Swami as a child have the story of how they came back to Swami, because they sort of take Swami for granted, but then at a certain point, they convert from being the child of a devotee to being a devotee. And that is a different process than the story of how you first see Swami.
Thank you very much, sister, for sharing. So you've been to Prashanti Nilayam at a tender age. You've been to Puttaparthi many, many times thereafter. Can you share two of your most memorable experiences with our beloved Mother Sai?
So the first one happened when I was in my final year of medical school. And many people who have heard me speak have heard me speak of this episode. I was in final year medical school, and Swami came in my dream. This was January of my final year. I had done 2 years of undergrad, and in those days, you didn't need a full degree. You could get into medical school. And I did 3.5 years of medical school. And this was about 4 months before I was graduating. And Swami came in my dream and said, if you want to please me, quit medicine. And so first of all, I was shocked that he said that, but I just felt like I needed to do it because I would be missing this opportunity. Somehow it felt like an opportunity and not a command that he wanted me to do this. So I went home to my parents and I talked to them about it. And, they were very supportive, amazingly. I'm not sure that I would do the same if my child came today and said that, but they were very supportive. And so I went to the school and I quit medicine. I withdrew. I said I would like to withdraw. And the dean actually asked me, are you sure you don't want to take a leave of absence? And I thought about it, and I thought to myself, Swami didn't tell me to take a leave of absence. He told me to quit. So I need to quit. And so I quit. And then I waited and we waited and we waited. And so at that time, during those years, my brother was a student of Swami. And so we would generally ask for permission to come to see Swami. And we were able to send him telegrams. So I had sent a telegram to Swami, and I sent a telegram to my brother saying, this is what Swami said. But I knew inside that I wasn't supposed to wait for physical confirmation. I was supposed to do it. And so that's what I did. But after I did it, Swami, we got the telegram back. Yes, I said that. And that's what she's supposed to do. Okay, so then we waited for Swami's permission to go. And then in April, finally, we got permission from Swami that we could go and visit Puttaparthi. And we reached there in the end of April. And for 2 weeks, Swami just ignored us. And by now I was convinced I had totally misread what Swami had wanted. I had made a big blunder in my life. Many other people were telling that to my parents. They were taking on the brunt of that. And so on May 9th, so May 7th and 8th were my final exams for the licensing exam in Canada for medical schools. And on May 9th, Swami called us in for an interview. And he said in Tamil, have you finished your studies? And I looked at him and I said, Swami, you told me to quit. I quit. And he said, me? Would I ever tell you something like that? I told you to finish and come. And my dad, who is a very quiet, will never open his mouth except to answer Swami's questions. He took out the telegram and he said, no, Swami, you said that she should quit. And he said, Yes, I told her to quit at that time, but now you must go back and finish. And so he said, and so he was very clear. And we had several interviews that trip. And each time he would say, no, this is just kindergarten. You have to finish. You have to do further studies. You have to do a residency. And in fact, in one time, he asked my mother what specialty she was. And she said, cardiology, Swami. He said, pediatrics? And she said, no, Swami, cardiology. He said, pediatrics? So he said that 3 or 4 times. And so I said, okay, I thought to myself, that's what Swami wants me to do. And so I returned. But returning to medicine is not as easy as just walking back in, especially when you told them, thinking that you were never going to see them again. I had told them, my guru has told me to quit. So now I went back and I said, my guru has told me to come back. And they said, well, you have to do a readmission process. So the admissions committee had to discuss my case, and they had to decide, okay, it is fine. But what they said is you have 3 conditions. The first condition is in 4th year, normally you get a lot of elective time. They wanted me to basically do a mini 3rd year again, where you do the major rotations. So that was fine. The second was I was supposed to give them a letter from a person of my religion who says this is normal. So first of all, nobody thinks this is normal. No Hindu thinks it's normal. No Sai devotee thinks it's normal. And there's no such thing as a professional Sai devotee who can vouch for you, even if they thought it was normal. So I was thinking, who should I get this letter from? And it turned out there was a professor of religious studies in the University of Windsor who agreed to write a letter for me. And he wrote a beautiful letter explaining the role of a guru and how the guru does have authority to over your physical life as well as your spiritual life, because they know what the true goal is. So I got that. And then finally, the third condition was I had to be examined by a psychiatrist who fortunately said I was sane and I wasn't under the influence of a cult. And, you know, when I was thinking about it, I understood that here it was a student whose guru said, leave, and she left. And guru says, come back, and she comes back. What would happen if this guru said, harm a patient? What would she do? And so I think they had to know that this was my choice. They had to know this was not something I was forced to do, but I took it as an opportunity to further my spiritual growth and my connection with God. And so they said that I could come back in, and I graduated a year after my class. And so I think my relationship to Swami was never the same again. And I think I sensed that. He drew me close to him after that event. And I connected with him on the inside in a way I hadn't before. And I think when I talked about children who know Swami early coming back to Swami, I think that was truly probably one of the key pivotal moments that did that and changed my relationship with Swami forever. So that is the first episode. The second episode happened in 2011, just as Swami was leaving his physical body. So that was April 24th. So I would say about April 8th or 10th, my father got very sick. My parents were living in Puttaparthi at that time, and my father got very sick. We thought he wasn't going to make it. I had gone. And because Swami was being looked after in the super specialty hospital, my father had to go to a hospital in Chennai. And so we finished everything there, and we saw that he was okay, he was stable. So we brought him back to Puttaparthi. On the way back, my father had an emergency just outside the super specialty hospital. So we had to stop instead of going to the general hospital. We had to stop, and he was admitted to the super specialty hospital in the room, probably right next to where Swami was. So he was there for a day or 2 days, and then he was transferred to the general hospital. And I would sit outside the door or in his room. And on the way, so all of this had happened, and I was on my way out on, I think, the 23rd or 22nd. I was on my way back from India. So I was driving out, and as I passed the super specialty hospital, suddenly I had an experience where I understood what Swami was talking about all these years. So I had an experience, you know how he says, remember who you really are and don't identify with the body. So I had an experience that lasted 2 weeks where I experienced myself as a bigger being who was using the body of Soumya to exist in this world. And it lasted for 2 weeks, and it didn't interfere with anything. I was able to work, I was able to do everything, but I just did it from a different place inside me. And the sentence that reverberated in me at that time was, I am a pure being of love and light and joy. And after 2 weeks, that feeling stopped being all the time, but I could get it back if I said that sentence. And then after some months, I lost the ability to get it back, but I could remember the feeling. And 2 things that I can say about this. You know, when I was small, I used to take piano lessons. And I always used to ask my teacher, when he was teaching me a song, he would give me my lesson. And then just before I would finish my lesson, I would ask him to play the song for me. And he would play the song for me so that I could hear what it was supposed to be like. And I almost felt that Swami gave me that experience so that I could know what it was supposed to feel like when I finally get there on my own 2 feet. With my effort and Swami's grace, someday it will be the state that I'm always in. But he gave me a sneak preview. And the interesting thing is, the feeling I had was, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Sixth Sense. And at the end of the movie, you get this aha moment that you have to go back and watch the movie all over again to catch all of the little things. So the feeling I had when this happened was, oh my God, I have to go back and reread Swami's discourses because now I know what he's talking about. And so that was the second big, most impactful experience. And I share these 2 because as much as I've had a lot of physical interaction with Swami, these 2 are with the omnipresent Swami. And so they just connected to me in a different place of my being. And I feel like Swami has guided my learning of what he has come to teach. And I really understood what he was saying when he said, I give you what you want until you want what I have come to give you. Because when I was in that state, I thought, and we're asking him for a job, and we're asking him for a child. that's so not what he is here to give us. And I actually understood that statement that day. So those are the two stories I wanted to share. Saiham.
Sister, that is so amazing. It is so inspiring, sharing those two experiences. But the second experience, Sister Soumya, lasted for about 2 weeks, where basically you were saying that internally there was this awareness that I am not the body, I am the Atma, the soul. And that awareness you basically felt, that was a feeling of awareness that you felt, and but you carried on over the next 2 weeks what your normal duties and responsibilities would have been at that time. But can you expand a little bit on how did you function during those 2 weeks in terms of your relationship of the higher self with the physical body? Was there a lack of body consciousness that existed where you felt identified with the true self and not so much identified with the body, or using the body as a vehicle of the Atma to still navigate your way through your daily existence?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I still used it. I just, I used it. I did what I needed to do, but I actually did it a lot more lovingly. Whatever I needed to do, I did a lot more lovingly and a lot more joyfully because it was coming from a place that had a lot more love and joy to begin with. And so everything seemed easy. And if you had asked me at that moment, I would have probably been able to say, I'm not the body. I'm this being. I'm this bigger being. But it didn't seem so relevant. That's just who I was. I mean, I don't go around saying, I'm Soumya the body. I'm Soumya the body every other day. It's irrelevant. I'm just doing what I need to do. Similarly, I just was this bigger being, but it wasn't relevant. I just did what I needed to do. And one of the things that I want to clarify is, you know how Swami talks about detachment? I was able to be detached at that time, but the feeling of detachment is not cold and it's not dry. It is full of love and joy. It's just that it's just everywhere. And so you don't feel like you specifically need anything to happen to Soumya to feel it. And so I actually got a lesson in what detachment is not at that time. But I don't think other than feeling it and just enjoying it, I don't think I thought about it. I just felt it. It was only after, when I had to think about it in order to get it back, or think about it in order to describe it, that I've ever been able to think about it or talk about it. When you're in that state, you just don't. It's just irrelevant.
So, sister, as well, you said when you were leaving Puttaparthi, as you passed the super specialty hospital, this awakening or dawning happened within. And yes.
So what happened was, when I reached home at that time in Phoenix, I reached home and called my mother and said, I'm home. And she gave me the news that Swami had left his body. So it actually happened right around probably 24 hours before. And since then, I have read that a guru can give you that as a gift. And I felt it was his parting gift to me.
That is so amazing, absolutely amazing, the grace of Bhagwan. And you said that it lasted for a period of 2 weeks, and it did it gradually leave the feeling,
Yeah.
it gradually dissipated. And have you been able since through inquiry or sadhana to rekindle or to feel that awareness and that feeling since?
Um, Probably not as strong, but I definitely know. It's not that I can't always feel, but I always know now. So I can I don't know how to answer that question too well. I I would say once in a while I can get the feeling back, but not having the feeling doesn't also matter because I know what I experience, and so I know that I'm not the body, and I know that that's all it is. When you know it, you don't always have to feel it.
That is really, really wonderful. What a wonderful divine experience you've had. But as it is now, do you yearn to feel or to experience what you experienced within that 2 weeks? You spoke about knowing, which is so wonderful because knowing is different from intellectually understanding. Knowing, comes from deep within that I am not the body. But the experience of that 2 weeks, do you feel motivated to want to experience that state again of that bliss and that connection with the inner self?
Probably. I think yearning might be a strong word, because one of the things I realize is that Swami wants us to put in the effort. And I'm not sure I always put in the effort, but yes, when I put in the effort, I yearn for it. But I can clearly see that sadhana does keep me close, does keep me close. And there are two things. That experience is one, but the experience of the devotee, where you are separate, is a different experience that I experience in bhajan. And both are different from each other, but both are sweet in their own way. And so I would say that I enjoy both when I have them.
Very, very wonderful sharing, sister. A very unique relationship you have with the outside Swami and the inside Swami. Really, really wonderful. So you have been a regional young adult advisor of Region 9. What is that, or what was that experience like, interacting and sharing and having the experience with the young adults?
Um, well, I think since in my head I have never become anything but a young adult, even though I'm much older now. In my head, I'm still a young adult. So it always feels wonderful because there is such energy and innocence, I feel. It is spiritual innocence in the sense that when you don't think you have the answers, you can approach Swami from a place of innocence. And I think that we are reminded of that when we um, when we interact with young adults, when we interact with children. So I think that is what I value a lot is the energy, the joy, the desire to do Swami's work, the desire to be the kind of person Swami wants us to be. that's what I keep getting inspired when I interact with young adults.
So, sister, interacting with them as an advisor and your understanding of Swami's teachings where the young adults are concerned, what do you envisage or see as the role of the young adults in the Satya Sai organization?
So I think that Swami puts a lot of emphasis on that age. So when I think about that, those are the years that Swami gave me and my family physical attention. It was from the age of 16 to 21 for me. And I think he does it to create a foundation that we aren't supposed to look for the map to guide our life when we're in our 50s and 60s. We're supposed to look for the map to guide our lives when we're in our teens and 20s. And so I feel like the role actually is to stay connected to the larger organization and learn from it and contribute to it. So I think people always think of themselves as either contributing or learning, either getting or giving. But I think there's always a twofold relationship we have with the organization. And I think we take from it and learn from it and grow from it, and it helps us structure our sadhana. And then we contribute to it. We take part in the service activities. We take part in the devotional activities so that we can contribute to a larger community prayer. And we contribute to it when we either teach in the Bal Vikas program or send children when in the later young adult years, some of them have children. So I think staying connected and giving and taking from the organization, particularly in learning to structure your sadhana. Swami gives us a very clear recipe for sadhana. He says you must do devotional activities, you must study my word, and you must do service. And it's like flour, sugar, and water. You need all the ingredients in order to make your cookie. And if you miss any ingredient, every one of us has a tendency to want to do one of them more. And especially young adults much prefer service and bhajan. They don't prefer Swami's teachings. They might agree with Swami's teachings, but they don't study Swami's teachings. I didn't. And so I feel like that's a realization I only have come to later. But Swami gave us all the three wings because all three are important in our sadhana. And it's because it teaches it cleanses your mind, your heart, and your hands, your head, heart, and hands. And so I think the role of the young adults is to take advantage of every aspect of the organization and contribute to every aspect of the organization, and to try and not silo, being separate. Yes, you want to be a bit separate because the issues and how you're going to apply Swami's teachings is going to be a little different. But you want to interweave that with activities done with the whole organization and the other parts of the organization, with the children, so you can be a role model, with the elders, so that you can learn from them, with all the different parts. So I think that's how I would answer that, Saida.
Thank you very much, sister, for sharing. Very important observations. So, sister, what does Sai Baba mean to you today?
Well, so, you know, there's two answers to that. I was fortunate enough to interact with the physical Swami. And the physical Swami was a family elder for me. He was like my grandfather or an elder uncle. My father would show him our passports before we would go somewhere. He would show him our tickets. And when we asked him about that once, my father said, well, I would do that to my father. So I'm just treating Swami like that. And in that role, he was my guide and he directed me to find the omnipresent Swami. So the omnipresent Swami is the other way in which I relate to Swami. And that Swami is the voice inside me. I have inner conversations. He plays games with me every day in the sense that I will ask him a question and there will be some sort of a sign on the side of the road or a license plate that gives me the answer. I might have lost something and I ask Swami where it is and he'll send somebody to give me an answer. So that's the omnipresent side that I play with every day and that lives as part of my everyday life. And so while I miss the physical Swami, and I wish I could have spent more time, he in the omnipresent form has taught me even more than he taught me in the physical form. And he continues to teach me. So I will ask a question and he'll give an answer. Or somebody will ask a question and the answer that comes out of my mouth is one that I think, oh, I didn't think of that before, but that's a good answer. So it's clearly Swami speaking or telling me the answer to that question. So I think I can only say that those are the two ways in which I interact with Swami now.
So, sister, that is very, very divine, very, very interesting. So, just want to understand a little bit better um, the relationship now that you have with the inner Swami, now that the physical Swami is transitioned. How do you constantly feel his presence and how do you continue to build that inner relationship with the inner Swami?
So I think that has happened. First of all, because Swami took away our crutch of the organization in the sense that he didn't allow us to go to centers for a year and a half during COVID because things were shut down. We weren't able to collect and have bhajan together. We weren't able to sit with each other and have satsang and have study circle. It was all done through Zoom, which has its pros, but sometimes you didn't feel like you were connecting as much. So he made us yearn for that connection again. And so I think what I have learned is during this time, I actually got more involved in teacher training. And as part of teacher training, I went back to Swami's discourses to contemplate them, to learn from them. And it has felt again like Swami is talking to me. And so I really have got a different relationship to reading and hearing his discourses than I used to. And I feel like that's how he is teaching me individually now in a way that I didn't experience before and may not have felt the importance because I wasn't alone not attending bhajan. So, so I think that's how I have kept that connection and continued to learn.
Thank you very much, sister. So, the quotation of Swami, the reminders that he gives to us about who we truly are, he says that you should affirm, I am God. I am not different from God. I am the infinite supreme, the one reality. I am Satchit Ananda Swarupa. I am Om Tat Sat Om. How, when you look at those affirmations of Swami, how do you relate to that? And how have you been able to practice and internalize that as our life's purpose?
So, I mean, obviously, now having had the experience I had, that song means, that bhajan means something so different than what it used to mean. See, there is a big difference between an affirmation that you believe and an affirmation that you're trying to believe. And so I think the main thing is that we keep saying that it's true until until Swami gives us the grace. I don't think any effort I made gave me that experience. Swami gave me that experience as grace. It was not something I did. But having had that experience, it's up to me to not take it for granted, to do the effort, to keep it alive as much as I can. And to every time you hear a bhajan that affirms that, to say, yeah, I know from inside.
Very, very wonderful sharing, sister. This interview is evoking so much of inspiration, very thought provoking answers you're giving, and that bliss of the inner contact and the inner relationship with the inner Swami. And um, as you are fully aware, you know, he's always said while in the physical form, do not mistake this body for me. I am not this body. It is merely a vehicle that I am using to build kinship with humanity. And so the inner message is always find me within. That is where I exist all the time. You've also taught the SSC groups 3 and 4 for several years. And Swami has said being an SSC teacher is one of the noblest offerings, one of the noblest activities we can do in the Satya Sai organization. In fact, he has said being an SSC teacher, you need not do any other sadhana because it's a 24/7 offering to him. Because as you so rightly said, it's not like teaching mathematics, closing the book and going home. Being an SSC teacher, most importantly, is being a good example of what you are sharing with the children. And that the children also become your gurus. You learn so much from them as they learn from you. So, can you share a little bit of what that SSC experience has been for you in your spiritual development?
Um, so I think that for me, SSE has been the method by which Swami places lessons in front of me. It has been my sadhana more than my seva. Sure, I think the children have benefited because I've tried, but most importantly, I think every lesson that I learn from Swami, they benefit because I learned it, not because I taught it. And I think there are several things. One is that as teachers, I think having the feeling that Swami teaches you so that you can digest and absorb the teachings and present it to the children at a level that they can understand. You have to digest and absorb the teachings. You can't take his teachings and present them. You have to process them inside you in order that you are very authentic when you give it to the children. You know the difficulties of understanding this. And Swami helps all along the way. He gives you aha moments. And the lesson is truly not ready to be delivered until the day it's meant to be delivered. It's like a pregnancy. That baby is developing until the day of the delivery. Just like that, the lesson is being developed inside you. Even if you've got a plan, Swami continues to teach you until the day it is meant to be delivered. So that's the first point I want to make, is that it is very much more a sadhana for us, and it is a structure of sadhana for us. The second thing is that I think the more we are able to be the example, that makes it, the children have an example, and you take that responsibility very seriously. The final thing is, as you were saying, I was actually talking about the difference between math and human values, as in math, you aren't born knowing math. So a teacher has to put that knowledge in you. But you're born knowing how to love. You're born peaceful. You're born joyful. You're born nonviolent. And the teacher just needs to show you that you are, needs to draw it out of you. And that, I feel, is something that as a teacher, I have always got to keep in mind, because it is so easy for us to get trapped into the thinking, oh, this kid needs to learn the human values, needs to learn right conduct. No, they need to exhibit it. They've already learned it. They just haven't exhibited it, and therefore they don't know they've learned it. So I feel like it is very much a case of giving them opportunities to practice so that they can see and everybody else can see that they have those human values inside them, and they have those pure feelings inside them. Saida.
That was very, very beautifully explained, sister. And it brought to mind the 5 teaching methods that are provided to awaken the human values and allow them to blossom forth in the child's life. So things like the silent sitting, the devotional sitting, devotional singing, the prayer, storytelling, as well as group activity are some of the activities that the child can engage in to awaken the human values and then allow it to blossom forth in their thoughts, words, and deeds. So, what a very important point you made, that when the child sees the teacher as the example of those human values, I think that has the greatest effect and influence on the child. Because, as you said, when you are constantly striving to live the message, when you speak it, as Baba says, when you practice what you preach, once there's unity in thought, word, and deed, it seems that there's an energy that goes from your words that effect that awakening in the child. And I think it's such a beautiful sadhana and offering to Swami, as well as how we evolved, how we grow from within while interacting with the children. So, thanks so much for sharing um, how it is you achieve that in the class. And it leads me to the other question that we and Swami made this comment, this statement that Educare is the Veda of the 21st century. And reminding ourselves that Educare simply means bringing out that which is latent within. When Swami made that statement, what do you understand by that? Can you expand a little bit when he says educate the Veda of the 21st century? Because his real message is based on those five fundamental human values.
I think that when I think of the Vedas, I think of how Swami, how the ancients discovered or heard the truth. They didn't study it externally, but they experienced it and they had these aha moments, and where God uncovered something. And so I think Educare is meant to be experienced that way. I don't think, and I think a lot of us who teach sometimes think it's the knowledge that is the key. And if they only could understand it. But I think it's meant to be heard in your heart in a different way. So I think by using the different techniques, by giving kids an experience of what this might look like, they're able to see, hear, feel, experience what the different aspects of God, which are the human values, might look like, might sound like, might feel like. And so the child grows spiritually as they experience these different experiences that the teacher puts in front of them. So I think it is meant to be that it is not just with your head. It is meant to be a listening to God inside you. And slowly but surely, Educare takes us from a parent-driven process to a teacher-driven process to a self-driven process. So that from the time the child is born, the parents take that role on of providing these experiences. And then the teacher takes the role on of providing these experiences. But then at the end, the child who is now grown and is a young adult, and later an adult, they now have the tools to listen to God inside them and hear what God has to say. Listen to their conscience, listen to God's comfort, listen to God's instruction. All of these, as an adult, if you've gone through that process of hearing it from someone else, you can now hear it directly from God. So I think that's what it means to me. But I'm not sure if that is what Swami meant. So I'm going to leave it and ask him to continue to explain what he meant.
Well, Sister Soumya, what I have come to realize in all the interviews that we do, the Awake, Unite, and Inspire, as with every aspect of our lives, once we let go and let Him, once we get out of the way and allow the inner Swami to have his way, whatever he wants to be shared is shared.
Yes.
So it also leads back to the next question that we had discussed before, where character development, Swami says, is like a three-legged stool. With referring specifically to children, you have the parent, the child, and the teacher or the guru. If one of the legs is cut off from the stool, it will fall. So very, very important is these three entities or persons working together in unity and harmony to achieve that goal of character development. So, from your experience with dealing with the young adults as a mother as well, as a professional, and as an SSC teacher, can you expand on the three legged stool and how important each component is in developing or weakening the character based on human values in these children, these fertile minds?
Um, yes, I mean, you can see it that where you have the parents completely involved and also practicing, also striving, the children gain more from the classes that are taught by the teacher. And I think that is a given, that the more alignment you have in all three, and the more striving you have in all three, the better it is for the child. And a lot of times you don't even realize it. As a child, um, I attended Bal Vikas when I was a child, like when I was 12 and 13. And you take it for granted. And I still remember lessons that my Bal Vikas teacher taught me. And I'm still understanding the meanings of what they taught me. So I really feel like, as a teacher, while it is ideal to have that three-legged stool very firm, very even, very balanced, very ideal, and very aligned, I think as a teacher, we must give as much as we can and encourage our students to do as much as we can, as they can. And we must encourage the parents to do as much as they can. But each child's stool will be the stool that Swami has given them also. Some people have parents, some children, excuse me, have parents who may not think that these are important. Some may not think Swami is important, but think values are important. Some may think they're important, but act in ways that may not be ideal. So I think that we are all striving together. And I think that's what the meaning of that three-legged stool is. We shouldn't point to the other person and say, you're not doing your bit. What we have to do is we have to all strive together and create a space where we all strive together. So I think, to me, it's a three-legged stool, but it's one where we all work on it together. Saito.
Thank you very much, sister, for sharing. And it's such an important point you made, because I remember one of Swami's guidance is before the class get started, visits to each of the children's homes, and having a chat with the parents as to their their role to be active participants in the development of the children. It was very important to do that so that the parents understood what was being taught in the class, what was the purpose, and also for them to commit, because these are your children, this is your responsibility. So you have to have an active role. And Swami has said, if you do not get the parents' active participation, it's not going to work. In fact, even before the child gets to Bal Vikas, that formative years from the time of conception to Bal Vikas, which let's say starts at 5, the child really spends time more so with the mother and at the home, and that is a very crucial period in the development of the child. So it's an important point you made, and then it had me thinking, sister, also that if a child goes through the Balvikas program and is well grounded and has a good foundation in human values, but after Balvikas, let's say in terms of going to school or to college, there is no continuity because, as you said, there might be a difference in priorities in the school. They may not focus so much on human value, but more on academic excellence. Then, how does the child then deal with situations like that, life applications, and also may not have friends or colleagues of the same like mindedness? How does the child navigate the situations with peer pressure and people who are, in inverted commas, sort of different from them? That becomes a challenge for them as they navigate through the practice of the human values. What are your views on what I've just said?
So I think it is because we say, this is my spiritual life and this is my secular life, that this becomes even an issue. Your spiritual life is your secular life. Your secular life is your spiritual life. And the more we can integrate all of that for the children and say that your sadhana, for example, your sadhana gives you focus, it will help your studies. Your silent sitting is, and your secular life, your good health, your the way you eat, the way you exercise helps with your sadhana. So I think we ourselves think of it as two separate pieces. And I think that the more we can integrate, the more we can show that the classes are not about being good. They are about being good and happy and joyful. And like, I think there's this dichotomy in children's minds that being good is boring and being good is hard, and not, and spirituality therefore is not fun. And I think as teachers and parents, I think we have to show them that life is just so much better when you take the spiritual route, and that the spiritual practices that we do actually help us in our day-to-day interactions. It helps us in our day-to-day work. It helps us be resilient when we are faced with problems. So I think it is life prep. And too often people don't recognize the importance of life prep. So that's what I would say about it.
Thank you very much, sister, for sharing. And again, as you were talking, I remember Swami also saying in relation to the roles of the parent and the teacher. He says parents must set good examples for their children. They can't tell the child, don't lie when they are lying, don't drink when they're drinking, don't smoke when you're smoking. And so that a child will follow not so much what you say, but what you are and what you do. So that role in the home with the parents being good examples is very important. And then he speaks about the teacher. He said if one student in a class is bad, that is not so bad. But when one teacher is bad, generations of children will become bad. So it's very important that we have the good parents and we have good teachers to produce good students so that we can have value-based citizens in the future. Because as you said, sometimes you may find in a home the parents do not have that drive, that desire um, to spend time with their children, and they may not see it as important, these human values. And also teachers, when they not so much SSE teachers, but when the child goes to university or to college, the emphasis is on more the academics. So the strengthening or the strengthening of that, those values that are taught or shared, um, to be awakened in the child in the class, because you may spend an hour and a half per week with that child and teach them the human values. But if it is not reinforced by practice at home by the parents, like for example, a simple thing like prayers before meals, if the child learns that to practice that in the class but goes home and there is no follow up, the parents don't um, foster it and said, okay, what did you learn in class today? Let's try and practice this every day so it becomes ingrained as a good habit in the child. If that support is not there at home or in the school, then it becomes really challenging for the child to navigate. And then so much other things impact, the company, the peer pressure. So I think it is so vitally important, as you said, for the three to be aligned and work as a team to awaken these human values. But when you look at it practically in life, you will find situations when you don't get the commitment and participation as you should from sometimes two out of the three parties. So it becomes, one has to then pray for Swami's inner guidance as to how to navigate the situation so that the child gets the best possible awareness, or is given the best possible structure to awaken those human values. But in reality, for example, in Trinidad, you find that we have single parents. You have children being born out of alcoholism and drugs. And sometimes when we do the community EHV classes, these are the kind of challenges you find. Parents don't know how to parent because they were never taught, they never learned it. And so these are challenges that we face. But I guess as you go along, it's a moment to moment awakening and guidance from within to navigate the situation. What are your thoughts?
That is exactly it. It's a moment to moment guidance that Swami gives you the right words. He gives you the lessons that those children need. It is never a coincidence when you come up with a lesson, because no matter what the lesson is, that's the lesson that your children needed that day. So I think the more we get out of Swami's way and the more we allow him to teach the children, him to talk through us, um, the better an instrument we would be.
Thank you, sister, for sharing. And finally, this is Many of the guests that we have on the program always says that this is a difficult question. When I ask it, um, the $1 million question, they say that when we look around in the society, we see apparently so much of chaos in the society, a breakdown of family unity in the home, nations fighting each other, greed being put over human values and ethical behavior. There's so much of debt, economic depression. From your understanding of Swami's teachings, from your practicing of his teachings, from what you've been involved in, if someone were to come to you and say, Sister Soumya, I want to make the world a better place. What can I do? What can I contribute? What would you share to somebody who has that good intention?
So I think that was a hard question. But I think it's a twofold answer. The first thing is, I think we can all create a space that's right around us, that whatever we do, if we do it with love, with devotion, um, with the right intent, that is, we're not doing it for our own benefit. We are doing it for the benefit of that situation. How can I improve this situation? If we always approach every situation that we are in with that question, how can I improve this situation? We will always be given the tools to do that. So that creates the space right around you, which is a haven for anyone to come and be in that space with you. The second thing is, I think when we choose our life work, we must choose it in such a way that it contributes to society. And every one of us has a little niche that we belong in, that is the work that we are meant to contribute. And if we take the job or career or whatever you want to call it as the work that you are offering this world, the work that you are offering Swami, we can't fix everything, but we can definitely work on one aspect of one thing. And so whether it's your life work, as in you are involved in the advocacy, whether it's your life work because you have that role in society, it could be anything. So if there are people who are very involved in saving animals, there are people who are very involved in poverty, there are people who are very involved in food, there are people who are very involved in health. Pick that space that you're going to make a bigger contribution to, because I think it's very hard to address everything out there. So the two places that I would recommend is pick your work in such a way that that is your contribution, and create a space right around you where every person you interact with and every work you do is done from that pure space inside you, so that you create that space that is around you. Yeah, so I think that's how I would answer that question.
Sairam. Well, Sister Soumya Panchanathan, it has been an absolute pleasure, an inspiration, and a joy conducting this interview with you. The Sri Satya Sai Global Council Trinidad and Tobago expresses gratitude and appreciation to you for taking us on that journey of your personal meeting and transformation at the lotus feet of our beloved Mother Sai. May Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba continue to bless and guide you, and may you continue to be a loving instrument in his divine mission. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you, Saidam, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It is always a pleasure to talk about Swami.